This video is brought to you by Miniature Market. Thousands of board games, discounted prices, miniaturemarket.com.
Hello my friends, it's the Game Boy Geek here. Today it's all about some hocus pocus, putting some spells together, using some magic in a fantasy setting, and we're going to be staring right into the eyes of a dragon. Now today we're talking about Prophecy of Dragons. This is the latest scenario in a very popular game called T.I.M.E Stories. This is the third scenario that has just come out. And so T.I.M E Stories was my game of the year last year, so I am extremely excited to play this. I'm going to show you a little bit of the new mechanisms in this game, show you a little bit of the artwork without spoiling anything, and then I'll tell you, hey, how is this? Is it better than Asylum? Is it different? Is it better than Marcy Case? Where does it slot in both mechanics, theme, art, playtime, things like that? Have they done anything new? I'm going to give you a full synopsis after this little intro. Let's take a look. Now here's the art style in the game. I'm just going to show you some of these characters. I'm not going to show you the special abilities, but just some of the artwork that's in there, so you can get a feel for what the style of the artwork is. And here is the other 4 characters that you get to choose from. Now I'm just going to show you some of the different mechanisms in the game. So the statistics that you'll be using in this scenario is agility, combat, and magic. And with combat, most enemies have this, and anybody with a red background color can attack, and some spells can attack. There's close combat, so if it has this symbol, you have to be in the same spot to fight that enemy. And there's ranged weapons, which allows you to shoot spaces away. You don't have to be in the same room as somebody else. You can shoot spaces away, but for every space away, it's worth 1 less attack, but you would ignore any skulls from that one. However, if you use a ranged attack in the same spot as where a creature is that you're fighting, then you would still take damage like normal, but this allows you to shoot into different rooms and avoid energy from that room. Now here's some of the different tokens in the game. So there's gold, and there's different ingredients that you can use to make spells, and also anywhere there's a lock icon you can retreat and actually leave there, but you lose one life point by doing so. Speaking of magic, there's different spells in the game. You would use a spell, you would have to roll the dice, and for that spell you'd have to see how many hits correspond with that spell. The cool thing about the spell is you can use some of them when you're moving to locations and such, and they don't take any time. But if you're using them in combat, when you hit somebody with a spell, you can take any shield out. So you don't have to start with the blank shields. You can just go right for the skulls or the time units, and that's some of the mechanisms in the game. Now, much like in Marcy Case, there is an encounter deck that goes on to Codex 1, and any time the time captain rolls a 1 or 3 when they're essentially moving, you have to use one of these encounter cards and something will happen. Here is the map. There's 5 locations to start with that you can go to: the Old Dock, the Market, Dragon Inn, Lost Woods, and Castle Plaza. And like the other scenarios, I'm just guessing that there's maybe some other places that you may go to. And the last thing I'll show you, good little teaser to leave this on, there is a pretty large deck here, and this deck is a mystery deck, and you don't open until you're instructed to, and that's how I'll leave this with no spoilers. Let's get to my final thoughts. Alright, well there's Prophecy of Dragons. Well, I am not going to spoil anything specific to Prophecy of Dragons, but I am going to compare certain things of this to the first one, Asylum, and the second one, Marcy Case. So if you haven't played any of those previous ones, be a little careful, because I am going to refer to some things in those other ones to help compare this as how it slots in between them. All in all, it is T.I.M E Stories. So the experience in the game itself is still amazing. It's just so fun to work your way through this. This specific story took us just under 4 hours of playtime, not setup, not eating lunch, all that stuff. So pure playtime is 4 hours, which is about on point with how long we spent on the other one. So it took us about the same amount of time to play through this entire scenario. There's things I liked about this scenario. There's things I didn't like about this scenario. Let me talk about the things that I did not like about this scenario. And this is a problem that has really been in all of them so far. And now, fairness to the publishers, from what I've talked about with them, is these first 4, Under the Mask is coming next, the first 3 of them, were sort of designed in time, and then done and then kind of pushed out into different quarters. So all the feedback that people have been giving them on certain things, rules and such like that, and some certain mechanics and things, they haven't really worked their way back into the games yet because they were already developed before all this feedback. And so a lot of the great feedback that they've been getting is going to start happening after Under the Mask. So there's even one more that's going to come out that might have some flaws before they start integrating some of the things. And one of the major flaws that's been in all of them are the lack of clarity in rules and specific situations. And this thing had a lot of these. There are a lot of things that just weren't clear. Sure, they give you some rules in the base that come out and you follow those and you think, okay, these all make sense. You start going through, but then there's a lot of things that are left out. A lot of icons that are different colors than normal. They don't make any sense. Certain things tell you to do certain things, but then, and I'm trying to do this without spoiling, I'll just say that there's a lot of things that are unclear and you're gonna have to find yourself probably going to Board Game Geek. And for some of these, you're gonna have to go into some spoiler threads just because people are asking questions specific to there, and you might see something that you don't wanna see when you're looking for this, and that's why this is a huge problem. A lot of these cards, I found at least 3 of them that had some misspellings or misprints on them. I don't think they're reading through the English translations of these cards thoroughly enough. So those are big problems though of the unclear nature of this, because you can't just look up an answer without possibly ruining the game for yourself. So in the future ones, Space Cowboys, you have to make everything very clear, overly clear, abundantly clear, even if it has to come with its own rule book. Do it, because it's ruining the experience for some people. So that's what I did. Those are the main things that I did not like about this scenario. Now the scenario itself, how does it slot with the others? The artwork is cool, it's different. This is probably the first scenario. I know a lot of people have been wanting to play this game with sort of their older kids, maybe 10 or 12 or something like that, and they didn't want to play with Asylum because it was gory and had some adult content there. They didn't want to do it with Marcy Case because it was really bloody and gory. This is probably the first one that you could probably play with an older child. So I think a lot of people would want to do that. You could probably do that with this version. It's the first one that I would probably recommend that you could do that with. So that's a positive. The scenario is fun. It's very different. One thing that I really like about this is that every one of these has really felt completely different, even though they use the same systems, they use the same mechanisms, and they all feel quite different, and this one does. This one pushes the envelope and does some new things, some different things, some very different things that really make this game stand on its own, and I like that too. It's not just the same old thing. Now, all in all, you're going through and doing the same types of things where you're going over here, you're talking to this guy, you're finding this item, you're maybe thinking about, is this a dead end or do I have to use this somewhere else? And you're piecing together an overarching puzzle, and that's in this too. But there's 2 or 3 things that are really huge in this that make this thing very different. Now, for a positive thing, that's very positive that it does feel very different. Now, on the negative side of thing, there is a specific task that you have to get through in this game that is really going to possibly frustrate you. And I'm not talking about like the end of the puzzle of Asylum frustrate you. I'm talking about, and I'm trying to do this without spoiling it, but there's going to be some spots where people might dislike this because of the nature of this. And after playing through it and looking back, I do see that there are some multiple paths that you can go through to help your way through this, that maybe you won't have to repeat a run more times than normal. But when you're going through it, you don't really know all of that. So you may have to do some more runs with this than you normally would, and you might be frustrated by a specific task. And here's just not a spoiler, but we ended up, and this is a callback. If you haven't played any of the previous ones, cover your ears. I had to use my pink beacon to get through this. And it did save the day for us, it did save the game for us, and it did get us to the point where we could continue on and get the rest of the game experience because of that. And if we did, and looking back, if we did not do that, we would have spent at least another hour or 2 in this game, and it probably would have not been nearly as enjoyable. Now, the game is sort of split up. The last quarter of the game, to all of us, was the most fun. It was the most engaging. It was the one that had some puzzles, some interesting things, some interesting maps, some things going on. And when looking back on it, the first 3 quarters, in comparison to the end of the game, was a bit of a slog. It was a bit of it was fun, don't get me wrong. I'm saying this in the context of Time Stories, where even though I'm saying things I didn't like about this, Time Stories is still more fun than almost every game that I play. So keep that in context. I love the game. But the end was so much more fun than the beginning that it made the beginning feel like a slog after that. Now, how do we slot this in between? Asylum was my favorite and still is because it was very puzzly. There was lots of very specific puzzles. There was an overarching puzzle, and there was a puzzle at the end that you could not brute force your way through. Some people did not like that aspect. I liked it. Marcy Case, I said, well, it was a lot more combat, and there were some puzzles that you could brute force your way. You could either guess your way through, or you could go and come back around and lose some time and do it and eventually just get the right thing there. This is even more on the other side. So Marcy Case is now in the middle, Asylum's on one side, and this is on the other side. This is the most heavily combat-oriented one. Because there are a couple of puzzles, and there's one of them that you could still kind of brute force your way through it. Like, for instance, there's a puzzle aspect that's, I'd say, similar in time and thinking as, like, in Asylum, it's the one where you're moving maps around, and like it's a 15-minute, 5 to 10-minute puzzle where everyone works on it and gets through it and it's fun. There's sort of one of those puzzly aspects here. There's another one that's sort of a mappy, puzzly aspect that's that you can kind of get through and it's exploring and it's fun. So there are some puzzly elements. At the end of both Marcy's Case and Asylum, there was a big puzzle that you need to figure out in order to finish the game. Again, in Marcy's Case, you could just guess right and get it right, or you could get it wrong and finally get it right without even knowing really how it's solved. Luckily, we solved it and it was very fun for us. This one has no puzzle at the end. You're just doing a ton of die rolling, a ton of combat rolling, and there's no puzzle at the end. And at the end, there's two ways you can finish it. We went the harder route, we did better things to finish it, and there was no different result in the end from doing it more things and doing it better. I did not like that aspect of this. So with all that being said, where do I rank this one? Well, Asylum's my favorite. Marcy Case I did not like as much, and this one I liked the least. Now with that being said, again, putting this in perspective, this is the least one I've liked, but at the same time, I've still had more fun playing this than most any other game. It was still a blast. I still loved it. I loved everything about it. It's still Time Stories, and I had a blast playing this, and I'm still looking forward to playing every single one because I love this system. It's just I wish there was some more puzzly elements. I wish there really wasn't that nagging task that I was kind of talking about that's really going to turn some people off, and I wish at the end there was some sort of big puzzle, even if you could possibly squeak your way through it like you could in Marcy Case. I at least wish there was one there as opposed to just combat and just rolling dice and having the right things and maybe the right equipment and things like that. So overall, it's my least favorite, but it's still Time Stories. It's still awesome. I'm really looking forward to the other one. And on a last note, one cool thing about this I really liked is they had in some of the decks, they had some callbacks. Like there's certain things that happened from Asylum that were brought into this one. There's certain things that we saw in Marcy Case that were brought into this one. And then there were some things looking forward from Under the Mask, the next one coming out, that were sort of brought into this one. And there was something that I think alludes to where it's going after Under the Mask, which I thought was cool. I love how they have this sort of overarching sort of storyline and callbacks and stuff, tying them all together, and I think that is really cool, and I love this system. Awesome game, tons of fun, my least favorite, but I still had an absolute blast, and I love it. I just hope that they really fix these problems going forward, because they're going to turn people off to the system and the game, because it can be very frustrating. But overall, still, even past that, even though you get pulled out of the system, even though you get pulled out of the mechanics, and even though you get kind of pulled out of that just enveloped theme when these things happen, it was still a ton of fun. But I think they can make it even better by getting us over that hump a lot more smoothly, and that is Prophecy of Dragons.
This video was sponsored by Miniature Market's Review Corner. The Review Corner features podcasts, video, and written game reviews by gamers for gamers. Miniature Market, the online gaming superstore. Thousands of board games, discounted prices. Check them out at miniaturemarket.com.